You think samurai battles were silent duels and perfect sword draws. They weren't. They were loud, chaotic, and terrifying. In this video, I'm putting you on the battlefield to show what really happened, what movies get wrong, and why survival mattered more than honor when everything collapsed around you there. Before a single arrow was fired or a sword was drawn, a samurai battle had already begun, and this is the part movies almost never show you. You didn't just march onto a field and fight. Weeks, sometimes months, of planning decided who would survive long before anyone saw the enemy's face. If you were there, you'd feel it immediately. Scouts had been moving for days, mapping roads, river crossings, and forest edges. Messengers ran non-stop, carrying news that could change everything. Terrain wasn't scenery, it was strategy. A hill could protect you. A narrow road could trap you. Arrive tired, hungry, or out of position, and the battle was already slipping away. Then came logistics, the most unglamorous killer of armies. Samurai didn't fight on honor alone. They fought on rice, arrows, horses, and morale. If supplies were delayed or stolen, men deserted. Hunger and exhaustion break even the toughest warriors. When the two armies finally closed in, there was no dramatic silence. You'd hear war drums pounding to keep formations together. Officers shouting orders, banners snapping in the wind so you knew where your unit was in the chaos. Standing there, waiting, you wouldn't feel brave. You'd feel sick. Your armor would suddenly feel heavier. Your mouth would be dry. You'd know that once the signal came, there was no turning back. And when that signal finally sounded, the first thing flying toward you wouldn't be a sword, it would be arrows. So the signal sounds. What do you expect next? Two warriors charging forward, blades flashing? That's the movie version. In a real samurai battle, the first thing you'd hear is the hiss of arrows cutting through the air. And not one or two, thousands. This was the opening move. Before anyone closed distance, archers stepped forward and turned the sky into a weapon. If you were standing in formation, ask yourself this: where would you even look? Up? Forward? At the man next to you? Arrows don't care. Horses panic. Men drop. Armor clatters as bodies hit the ground. Some soldiers never made it past this phase. They died without ever swinging a sword. This is why early samurai armor was designed the way it was. Those wide shoulder guards and boxy shapes weren't decorative. They were built to deflect arrows. And even then, protection was never guaranteed. You try to keep formation. That's what officers screamed at you to do. But imagine holding your ground while watching men fall around you. Would you stay still? Or would instinct take over? Once enough arrows had thinned the ranks, commanders pushed their troops forward. Distance closed fast. Noise swallowed everything. The battlefield became a moving mass of fear, shouting, and momentum. And this is the moment movies love, but they still get it wrong. Because what came next wasn't elegance or honor. It was chaos. And when order collapsed, the real danger finally arrived, close enough to touch. This is the part movies pretend is beautiful. It wasn't. Once arrows thinned the ranks and formations collided, order disappeared fast. Lines broke. Commands were drowned out by shouting, steel, and panic. If you were there, you wouldn't be thinking about technique or honor, you'd be thinking, where is the nearest threat? And how do I not fall? Because falling was deadly. Mud, blood, broken arrows, bodies, the ground was a trap. Slip once and someone finished you before you could stand. Spears and naginata dominated this phase, not swords. Why? Because distance meant survival. A blade on a long shaft kept enemies away and let you strike without getting tangled in bodies. Ask yourself honestly, could you fight calmly while being shoved from behind, screamed at from the side, and rushed head-on by someone just as terrified as you? Most people couldn't. Freezing was common. So was running. Fear spread faster than courage. And this wasn't one-on-one combat. There were no duels. You didn't square up and trade blows. You attacked whoever was closest, wounded, distracted, or isolated. If someone turned their back, that's when they died. Not because it was cruel, because hesitation got you killed. Swords came out later, when formations dissolved and fighting became personal. Tight. Desperate. exhausting. Every movement burned energy you didn't have. By this point, you wouldn't know who was winning. You'd only know whether you were still alive. And once the fighting slowed, once bodies stopped moving, something even colder began, deciding who counted as a victory and who didn't. By now, any idea of fairness is gone. This is the point where movies completely lie to you. In a real samurai battle, there were no rules about fighting clean. If you were wounded, tired, or alone, you were a target. If you turned your back, even for a second, that could be the end. Ask yourself honestly, if it was you or them, would you hesitate? Samurai didn't wait for opponents to recover. They didn't announce attacks. They struck from the side, from behind, in groups. If someone went down, they were finished quickly. Not out of cruelty, but because leaving an enemy alive meant risking your own life seconds later. And here's something most people never think about: the noise. There was screaming. Metal hitting bone. Men calling out for help that wasn't coming. You wouldn't feel heroic in this moment. You'd feel overwhelmed, exhausted, and desperate to keep your footing. You also wouldn't know who was winning. Smoke, dust, and movement erased any sense of the bigger picture. Orders barely traveled. You fought the people in front of you and hoped your side held elsewhere. This is where fear decided more battles than skill. Once one group broke and ran, panic spread instantly. Victory often came not from killing everyone, but from making the enemy flee. And when the running stopped, when weapons lowered and exhaustion set in, you might think the battle was over. It wasn't. Because what came next was just as brutal, and far more deliberate. So the enemy breaks. The noise fades. Weapons lower. Do you feel relief yet? You shouldn't. Because surviving the fighting didn't mean you were safe, it just meant you'd entered the most unsettling part of the day. The battlefield was now covered in wounded men, dying men, and bodies that hadn't finished bleeding yet. And in this moment, hesitation was dangerous. If you were injured, even slightly, you were in trouble. There were no field hospitals. No antibiotics. A cut that didn't seem serious could kill you days later. Infection was common. Fever was a death sentence. Ask yourself honestly, how many modern injuries would you shrug off that would end you back then? Then came the grim work. Heads were taken. Not for trophies the way movies suggest, but for proof. Commanders needed evidence of who was killed to reward soldiers and confirm victories. Promotions, land, and pay depended on it. This wasn't symbolic. It was administrative. You'd also search the field for friends. Maybe you'd find them alive. Maybe you wouldn't. And if you did find them wounded, there was often nothing you could do. Even the winners were exhausted, starving, and terrified of what came next. Because battles were rarely final. Retreating enemies regrouped. Allies demanded action. Another clash could come tomorrow. So if you were standing there, covered in dirt and blood, you wouldn't be thinking about honor or glory. You'd be thinking one thing: is this really over? And that question leads straight into the final truth: how the myth of the samurai was built after all of this ended. Here's where everything you think you know about samurai warfare starts to fall apart. The calm, disciplined, honorable warrior you've seen in movies. That version wasn't born on the battlefield. It was created after the fighting was over. Long after the bodies were buried and the screams stopped echoing. Ask yourself this: who writes history, the men running for their lives, or the ones sitting safely afterward? It was the survivors, the officials, the scholars, and later the poets who reshaped chaos into meaning. In the centuries that followed Japan's most violent periods, especially during long stretches of peace, society needed order. It needed role models. So the samurai were turned into symbols of loyalty, restraint, and moral clarity. Bushido, as we imagine it today, was polished and formalized after many of the bloodiest wars had already happened. That doesn't mean samurai had no values. They did. But on the battlefield, survival came first. Fear was real. Mistakes were fatal. Honor didn't stop an arrow, and philosophy didn't close a wound. If you had been there, you wouldn't have been thinking about legacy. You wouldn't have been wondering how future generations would remember you. You would have been focused on staying upright, staying alive, and not being noticed at the wrong moment. And that's the uncomfortable truth: the legend exists because the reality was too hard to look at directly. So the next time a movie shows two samurai standing in silence, waiting for the perfect strike, remember what you've just seen instead. Real battles were loud, crowded, fearful, and unforgiving. They were decided by preparation, panic, and survival more than skill or honor. If this changed how you see samurai warfare, hit like so more people can discover the real history. And if you want more myth-busting deep dives into the past, subscribe and turn on notifications. Let me know in the comments which historical legend you want stripped down next.